I decided for this occasion to break with tradition. I changed my shirt, and I got a desk. There's no other watch that has ever really stirred more out of me than the humble Rolex Explorer. And I think it's fair to say that it has fundamentally affected how I view watches and the hobby over the last 5 years. I have grown, and the watch has grown with me, so to speak. But beyond just being a good watch, the experience of owning it's been cathartic. You know, the watch has been on my wrist now for almost an entire year, and it's been fantastic. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would ever own a Rolex, and isn't that always the case? It's unbelievable until it happens. And I never thought that the Explorer would be my first, because my relationship with these watches, rocky at best. Tumultuous. 1 month it's fantastic, the next month it's boring. I've never really been able to slow down and appreciate the watch for what it is and for what it offers. But I am convinced that there is a mysticism around it, something almost unspoken but accepted about how well it works. Now, whether or not this has been manufactured by us enthusiasts over the decades, or if it's something valid, something genuinely worth looking into, we will have to see. One thing is clear, the Explorer made me fall for the appeal of Arabic numerals on a dial, the more classic styling of mid-century sports pieces, so my attention turned to watches that had more of those similar design cues. And they are my bread and butter nowadays. A watch does not feel 100% like a watch to me unless there are numerals on its dial somewhere. That's how much the Explorer has messed with my head. And even though I moved to other pieces, field watches, chronographs, divers, pilot watches, the Explorer was always in the back of my mind as a great watch to maybe experience yet again. And so life got in the way of a few things, as it usually does. I lost my dad and had to move across the country. And I buried my head into the watch hobby. I did it as a distraction from what was going on in the real world. And I can't tell you how many times this sort of work has saved me in my darkest moments. And when my 30th birthday rolled around the corner and I realized it was a significant one, like halfway through the year I realized, I'm turning, okay, need to do something, decided to celebrate with a Rolex to mark this milestone. But it wasn't one of those grandiose moments like so many enthusiasts talk about, when they get the call and they get the champagne and it's this lofty, great experience that they never forget. In my case, I wasn't even conscious about the moment at all. It felt more like a novelty, like a box I was checking off. Being fortunate enough to say, right, you've gone through a lot over the last 12 plus months. Treat yourself to a significant watch. Why not? Commemorate this third of your life. But maybe deep down also celebrate that this is a gift that your father could never have bought you himself. But I decided after a long enough debate that I should settle with the watch that propelled me down this rabbit hole in the first place. But even when pulling the trigger on the Explorer after finally deciding, I still was not sure if it was the ideal choice. Because I've always been a dive watch guy, someone who aspired to owning a Submariner for the longest time. And the Explorer was never something that really registered with me. In fact, there's always been a tinge of a love-hate relationship with these watches and me. Because a few years ago, the 214270, the 39mm model, graced me with its presence. The watch basically became a small part of my collection at the time, and from the day I began wearing it, I could appreciate the fantastic build, the more modern look of it all. But something felt off. Over time, I summed it up as the proportions, the flatness of the crystal, the dial text, the accentuated plots around the minute track. These are all such minor things, but they detracted from what I wanted the ideal Explorer to be. And truth be told, I really began to dislike the watch, so much so that I stopped wearing it. And also hated the scrutiny because I wanted it to be greater. So to wake up then, years later, it must have been 3 years later at the time, and to then say, right, I'm going to commit to an Explorer again, I was incredibly skeptical of the idea. How many videos have been made about the Explorer? How many think pieces? I think I've made at least 6 in my lifetime, maybe even more. There's probably tens of thousands of videos of this watch online. Now, I can't sit here and wax lyrical about how it can be categorically defined as the perfect watch, if you like. Or I can give you a list of the many pros and cons and try to sum it up. But what I have always wanted to do first and foremost on this channel is to understand its impact as a design, but also to ask how it affects us on a deeper level. How does a watch do more than what it says on the tin? And it's taken a year of owning this watch to get me to finally put words down on why it is such a charming thing. But I'll also say that what I like most, with years and hindsight now behind me, is that I can appreciate the Explorer for what it is. It's a Rolex, it's a very good watch. It's one that I feel captures the very essence of Wilsdorf's original vision of the Oyster Perpetual. We'll talk about that in a moment. The Explorer can be seen as an end in itself, not a means to an end. And so often we see people pursuing this watch, buying it solely to pursue another more advanced piece, like, I don't know, the Submariner or the GMT, the Daytona. A go anywhere, do anything watch, absolutely. A one and done, 100%. That was even a part of my criteria when choosing this first Rolex was, what Rolex do you want to have on your wrist when you're 80 years old? 36mm Explorer. All that said, I can appreciate it for the piece that it is, but it also doesn't distract me from the other brilliant watches out there. So we're already 40 minutes into this recording. Let's try and get a review going. The moment I put the 124270 on my wrist, I knew I'd made the right choice. It's as simple as that. There's some things in life that you just can't fight. I can't say that I have ever worn a watch that so immediately felt like it had always been there. Yeah, that could be the tagline for the video. How these watches seem to integrate themselves into your day-to-day, it's mind-blowing. But that's the magic of Rolex. Now, I know this modern version isn't everyone's favorite. There is a large group of us who prefer the previous 36mm model for many reasons. You know, the dial, the bracelet, the lug width, even the quarter Arabics. But what really struck a chord with me after having this watch on the wrist for a few days is how the size and proportions felt like a deliberate callback to a time before the 14270 from 1990. From its 19mm lug width, its bracelet tapered down to something like 14mm, how the case conforms to a shorter lug span. Very quickly to me, it felt like a piece that was pulling inspiration from a reference like the 5500, an Air King, a 34mm case. A touch of old world proportions with modern styling. And being a kid of the 90s, believe it or not, this design is as old as me. That all plays into the discretion of this watch, and the discretion is so addictive. You know, this Goldilocks 36mm diameter that always seems to work with whatever you're wearing. The beating heart of the Explorer though, I don't ever see it or think of it as the Everest watch. I had a conversation with a friend at the gym the other day. We were talking about the first ascent of Everest, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. And I woke up to the fact just then and there that I owned the Everest watch. That's how little it registered with me. Being the commemorative watch, the romance is great. It's become a part of the marketing around this piece. And it's a fantastic name. Explorer can denote so many different things. But if the Explorer name was omitted from the dial, I wouldn't miss it. To me at least, it's an Oyster Perpetual in the purest form. It has all the bells and whistles of a professional Rolex with the more sophisticated clasp, fully brushed components, but with that elegance, not of a slab side, but with the curvaceous case lines. It has a slim thickness. And on top of it, such a captivating dial. When we page through the history books and we see how Wilsdorf envisioned his version of the wristwatch, many traits like the oyster case, the bracelet, the numerals on the dial, even the Mercedes hands, these were all present in one iteration or another. So a century on, the Explorer, this watch, I think in many ways captures the image of what the idyllic Oyster Perpetual stood for. That's my argument. There's charm, there's charisma, a touch of elegance with a sporty quality, while at the same time it has cues of old world design that embodies what traditional Rolex was about. And getting close to this dial and seeing how the details were handled, this is very much what epitomizes a great Explorer. From the glossy texture, the fully loomed numerals, the length of the hands, it still strikes me seeing how well everything has been situated, positioned, placed on this dial in particular. It's some of the subtle things that I can really appreciate about Rolex. Like for example, the counterbalance on the second hand and how it perfectly intersects through the middle of the Mercedes hour hand when it passes. I've also noticed that the crystals of these seem to have been treated with an anti-reflective coating of some kind. It's something that's not often spoken about, but the readability of this watch in more direct light seems far better to me than the earlier 39mm variant. The one pet peeve I really had with the model is I struggled so much to tell the time or even appreciate the black dial because there was something about how it distorted. But I feel with a watch like this, there is a sense of care taken with virtually every single aspect. And let's not forget the 3230 movement, which is a modern day masterpiece. When you start reading into it, digging into what they did to improve this caliber, from the new escapement, from how the balance is arranged, also considering its 70 plus power reserve and it's scary accurate. I mean, you're getting a movement in this little watch that you're also getting in a Submariner far more sophisticated and more expensive pieces. So what is it that makes the Explorer special? That there is something mystical about it. I would say it's less about what it doesn't offer, but more about how wonderfully restrained it is. Striking that perfect balance of providing you with nothing more or less. I guess it's like with some of the best dress watches in the world. It's that art of understanding restraint. And when you look at this piece from its bracelets, its clasp, to case, especially its dial, the proportions, thickness, feel on the wrist. There is nothing about this particular Explorer in 36mm that makes you yearn for more. It strikes a balance that I believe so few sports watches manage to achieve. Now there are pros and cons. The bracelet taper is going to take you by surprise, no question. It's very extreme, but visually I think it plays in the watch's favor. The overall size of the piece, it does feel small, probably due to how the lugs are more round. And the size is charming, but it is something that you will have to get used to. You might even have to adjust to it. But the pros of this watch, they far outweigh the cons. What's the verdict then? The rocky ride that I've had with the Explorer over the years. Put it this way, I don't wear this watch every day. I'm in a very privileged position to own a handful of other fantastic pieces, and frankly, I struggle to make up my mind what to wear next because so many of them feel absolutely perfect for the task. But on a Friday evening, all the way through to a Sunday, or on that rare occasion during the week, throwing it on, it's always a watch that is so complimentary and characterful. And I'm of that belief that if you can afford to own one, even if you aren't a Rolex fan, it's something to look into. A 36mm Explorer. As an only watch or a specialty piece to add to the collection, it's like that bit of seasoning that you add to your steak to make it all the more interesting. So my experience with the Explorer has gone full circle, disliking the previous generation because I wanted more, or maybe even less, to its design. Being once bitten, twice shy, getting another, and having such a great year wearing it. And even though the Explorer is not a daily driver for me, it would be one of the last watches to leave my collection. I think that alone exhibits what staying power means, how much of a staying power it has. The real beauty to come from this experience is I could end this hobby, hypothetically, very unlikely, who leaves the watch hobby, but I could end the hobby saying that this is the only Rolex that I own and be content with it. I've come to that realization that I don't need a Submariner or another professional piece that I thought I did, because so many other watches have stepped in to take that place. And the yearning, the drive to own a second Rolex, it hasn't been strong. Like I said, the Explorer can be treated as an end in itself, not a means to an end. And beyond all else, the simplicity of this watch, it feels like an anchoring point. A piece to be worn at a time when I don't want to think about watches. I said to a friend once that it's like putting on a reset watch. Something that doesn't demand your attention, but it also wipes the slate clean. Unclutters the mind, So the long and short of this lofty video that makes no sense is I would 100% recommend a 124270 Explorer. If you're more inclined to wearing a larger watch than the 224270. There's something about these pieces that feels special. It feels like Rolex did so much homework when recreating this watch in its smaller size. And I think it would bring anyone a lot of enjoyment. So that's all I have to say about this tremendous little watch. You might have noticed that the set has changed quite a bit. I'm wearing a white shirt. First time I think I've worn a white shirt for a video in 2 years. And I've got a desk, which makes it all the more dynamic and interesting, I guess. I don't know if it's going to stay. Maybe we can have a vote in the comments or whatever else. But I'd like to know your thoughts on the Explorer, because I know it's a fan favorite, and many of you have been eagerly anticipating hearing my thoughts on this watch. It's really difficult to put words into context around this piece, especially considering I've spent so many years talking about it. Finding that perfect balance of what makes this watch so good, so versatile, and why it checks so many boxes, not only as a good representation from Rolex as a brand, but as a watch in general. Even for the outsider, it's such a cool little watch to wear. There's more than enough reasons why so many of us swear by the Explorer, and I would like to know your thoughts about it. Whether it's the newest generation, whether it's the 39mm, or the previous 36mm, even the 1016, go for it. I would love to hear your opinions. As always, I'm so appreciative of you taking your time to watch this video, so thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.